This video continues our look at data in our Unit 5. So we're now actually going to go back to single variable data and talk about something we can do with both quantitative and categorical data, where we have either a list of numbers or a list of categories. And we want to talk about displaying that data. So we had looked at pie charts for the categorical data. That's one way to do it. But now we're going to look at a way of doing it for categorical data or quantitative data. And it's called a histogram. So in a histogram, what you do is you look at how many are in each category or how many are in a range of numbers. So, and that how many is called frequency. So here's the example. There is a competition in math called the Mathematical Olympiad, and it's kind of like the Olympics for math. So countries send a team and they compete and they do math problems. And so each year, or each time it comes, the one country wins. And so you can imagine having a list of the countries that won from year to year. So first year, United States won, then China won, then China won, then Iran won, then Hungary won, then China won, then Russia won. And this would continue. Okay, so instead of just looking at the big list, well, we could do a pie chart, of course, but instead what we could do is we could count up how many times the US won, how many times China won, how many times Iran won, and basically do, well, it looks like a bar graph, and it kind of is a bar graph. But when it's specifically how many times a category came up in a list, it's called a histogram. So it's a special kind of bar graph. So we can see that, China won 19 times because the bar went up to 19. It's not that there was data where there was China and the number 19 next to it. It was just that China showed up 19 times in the list. That's how you want to think about this. So it's a sort of a different situation, even though it looks like a bar graph. Russia, 16. Russia won 16 times, and then so on from there. So we can answer questions. How many times has Hungary had a winner? So you just go to Hungary and it looks like 6, right? So Hungary won 6 times. In our list, which was incomplete, you imagine if you had the complete list, Hungary would have shown up 6 times. Okay. Here's an interesting question. Was the 5th winner Romania? Now, if you go to Romania, it does go up to 5. But the answer to this is most definitely no. The fact that the bar goes up to 5 for Romania, what does that mean? That means Romania won 5 times. We have no idea which years Romania won, and we certainly don't know who the 5th winner was. So this 5 does not mean the 5th winner. It just means there were 5 times that Romania won. And in fact, in my list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Hungary was the 5th winner. So this is a common mistake that often people make, is to think that a histogram would be able to answer this kind of a question. The histogram just totals them up and tells you how many in total. Doesn't let you know which ones are which. Okay? You would have to go back to the original list for that. So Romania was not the 5th winner here. Here's another example. This time it's numerical data. So this is actually taken from just a personal blog, but it's a public blog that somebody who is an aspiring writer, he writes a blog, and he tracked how much he wrote on a daily basis, because I think the idea is if you're a writer, you're just supposed to make sure that you write a certain amount every day, or you're supposed to write as much as you can. And so he tracked how many words he wrote, because that's like sort of the quantitative way of saying how much you wrote, is to count the words. And so you can imagine, like on day 1 he wrote 1,072 words, and then on the next day he only wrote 316 words, and on the next day he wrote 785 words, and so on. So we just have this list of numbers, each one how many words he wrote on that day. So that would have been the original data, but now here we see it represented as a histogram. And so we have less than 100, 100, in the hundreds, in the 200s, in the 300s, in the 400s, in the 500s, and so on. The labeling here is a little awkward. It's hard. This plus is kind of strange, but I think this one would be 600, this one would be 700, and then this one would be 800 and 900. I think that's the way to interpret this. Okay, so how many words were written on the 15th day? So based on what I just went over on the previous page, I hope you realize that the answer is we cannot tell. We do not know. Not from this histogram, we don't. We would have to go back to the original list and find the 15th number, right? What you don't want to do is look for a bar that went up to 15 and say, oh, that's in the 900s, so he wrote 900 words on the 15th day. No, all that this bar means is that 15 different separate days he wrote 900 some words, but we don't know which days they were. That's really important to understand. So we do not know the answer to that question. How many days had between 900 and 1,000 words written? Okay, that's this one. That's 15. And again, we don't know which days. It could have been the first day and the 80th day and the 81st day and the 90th day. Like we don't know. We don't know which days, but there were 15 of them. And then here's a question that we can answer on this, because this was quantitative data, right? These were numbers that we couldn't have done on the Math Olympiad because that was categorical. Can we roughly say what the mean or / median is? Now, obviously, if we had the original data, the full data set, it would be long because there's lots of days represented here. We could get the mean by adding them up and dividing, or we could get the median by putting them in order and picking the middle number. But if all we have to go with is the histogram, can we still at least ballpark it? And how would we do that? Well, you know, I mean, this is telling you how many there were. Again, in the less than 100, 100, 200, 300. So we're kind of looking for the middle of this distribution of numbers. And so I would say the middle is probably somewhere in here, right? Probably around 800, maybe. So yeah, I'll say 800. If you said 850, I would accept that. Even if you said 1,000, something as high as 1,000, I would accept that. This is not exact. But if you told me 1,500, there's no way, right? There's way too many below 1,500 versus the ones that are above 1,500. It also isn't necessarily the tallest one. There were in the bar that goes with 500 words is the tallest one, but I think there are a lot more days that were more than 500 than were less than 500, right? Here's all the less than 500 days. Here's all the more than 500 days. So even though it's the tallest one, I don't think it's representative of the middle number. Okay. So that's the idea. You can ballpark an answer to the mean or median based on the histogram. And then one more thing to say about histograms is sometimes you can have a double histogram. You can have two sets of data, each with a histogram, and you put them on top of each other. And usually that's for the purposes of comparing. So this is a little bit hard to see on the screen as it is, but this is Africa, Asia, Europe, or Eurasia, I should say, Europe, Latin America, Middle East. And we have two sets of data that went into these two histograms. We've got total international terrorist incidents in the year 1996 in the purple. And so the bar, so there were 11 in Africa that year, 11 in Asia that year, etc., 121 in Europe that year, and the others. And then the pink is the international terrorist incidents in 1996 that involved fatalities, because of course not every incident involves somebody dying. So here the pink ones represent that. And so you can look at the purple on its own, you can look at the pink on its own, and you can compare the purple to the pink and maybe draw some interesting conclusions from it. Like, for example, Europe has by far the most total incidents, big big purple bar on top of Europe, but the pink bar isn't sort of correspondingly really big. It's small and kind of in line with all the others. So even though Europe has a lot of terrorist incidents, they don't have an above average number of incidents that involve fatalities for some reason. I have no idea why. So that's something that you can do as well, is you can put two histograms on top of each other and sort of compare them. Okay, so that's the idea of a histogram.